Hello, and welcome to the Playful Creative, a place to explore how playfulness, art, curiosity, and creativity enrich the human experience. I'm your host, Sarah Moyle, a visual storyteller and creative catalyst, and I'm endlessly curious about the ways people bring creativity, experimentation, art, and play into different areas of their lives. So listen in to learn from play experts, artists, musicians, and so many more interesting people. On this very first episode of the Playful Creative, we welcome Gary Ware of Breakthrough Play. Gary is a creative and strategic play consultant. By day, Gary helps companies and professionals level up their skills. By night, he is an improv comedian. But perhaps his favorite passion is helping people become the best versions of themselves through fun and entertainment. His first book, The Playful Rebellion, is part autobiography, part guidebook to living a playful, curious life. And by the way, I illustrated it. Today, I'll ask him to share his story, a little bit about his book, and we'll talk about the importance of play for innovation, life balance, and resilience. So no matter who you are, where you're from, or how you like to be creative or playful, we're glad you're here with us today on The Playful Creative. All right, so welcome, Gary. I'm so happy to have you here as my first guest.
Yay! And I am so happy to be your first guest. Thank you for having me, Sarah.
Now, we met through a couple mutual friends from the Lego Serious Play community, I believe, and kept hearing that we needed to meet each other. And we had a long distance social media friendship for a couple years. And then finally you said, hey, I've written this book and I need an illustrator. So we actually got to meet, over Zoom in times of COVID. We also got to meet in person when you were up here for the World Domination Conference.
Yes, man, talk about serendipity. And yeah, it was one of those things where we were sort of like in the same orbits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just like, oh, hey, I have this thing. And then you're like, yeah, cool. I do illustrations. And I was like, I know you do illustrate. And it's kind of like, let's just be honest. Sometimes like when you haven't met them in person, but then you like sort of know each other through social media. And then you're like, all right, what is acceptable? Because I'm like, I've seen a whole bunch of things. I know you have like two beautiful kids and you do all these awesome things. And like, but we haven't like talked about these things. So like, yeah.
Tis the age, the digital age. So I want you to just tell our listeners a little bit about what you do, how you got into what you do, and some of the differences you've seen it make for you and for others. Because
cool.
I just find it so interesting.
Awesome. So do you want the whole origin story?
Yeah, but let's do like the abridged version.
Okay,
let's do the
great.
SparkNotes version.
SparkNotes version. So
yes.
My background is in marketing and communications. I thought I was going to be a marketer, sort of like a madman Don Draper, like forever. That was like my sort of identity, my path. And I'm glad that I've since pivoted and I'm doing the things that I'm going to talk about. But there was a point where I was burning myself out left and right. And if I was honest with myself, I like felt like a fraud, like imposter syndrome, the whole 9 yard. I was a young executive, had a team underneath me, and it was because I was good at my job, but I wasn't necessarily good with managing people. So at the suggestion of a mentor, I took an improv class and I was like, what does this have to do with creativity? What does this have to do with like leadership and all these things? And he said, trust me, you'll find out. And boy, did I, because it awakened something inside of me that had been dormant. And for me, it felt like recess, that feeling like, when you go out and you play and you're completely focused on something and then, everything is great. And that's how it was. Like I would be excited for Mondays because I have improv class. And then, the work was still the same, still stressful, all of that stuff. And I started bringing some of these activities that I would learn in improv class to my team. we would play these silly games that helped me be able to be on a stage without a script with my other teammates. And we found that it helped us collaborate better and be better listeners. And so that helped me rediscover my sense of play. The thing that I, again, thought that as an adult, should have turned that off. But I found that, wow, I'm being more creative. So I was known as the improv guy. And I started being, very curious about like, hey, how can I improve creativity amongst my team? And this was all in service of me and my team. And then, fast forward, another 5 years, I found myself running my own agency. And then that business relationship didn't end well. My business partner decided that, hey, we would be better off doing our own thing. And so he took the business and left me with a small little check. And then I, found myself, with a almost 1-year-old. And then a landlord said, hey, we have to sell your house that you've been renting. And then I found myself unemployed and about to be homeless. And I was like, what do I do? And so that was the catalyst that got me to get into facilitation. And so here I am. And what I do, so since you asked that, I use what is called applied improvisation and other playful methods as a training tool to help individuals and teams be more creative and collaborate better. And at the end of the day, just be the best versions of themselves. And I love it. It's so rewarding and amazing.
That's wonderful. What I really love about your story is that you made the most of a situation that, was somewhat, very disruptive and catastrophic to your life, right, in your world. And you took that opportunity to reevaluate, dismantle, and reconstruct what you wanted your life to be like. And I think that's hard to do sometimes when we're just going about our day-to-day life and maybe our job is okay. Sometimes we almost need that, it's like you need to hit rock bottom before you make the change sometimes. But I love that you made something really positive out of that situation that you found yourself in. And you chased and pursued what was bringing you energy and joy instead of just plugging back into another, corporate job, which I'm sure you could have. You took
that was an option.
Followed what you loved. Yeah.
That was definitely an option. And I like to say on the record, I do not wish that upon anyone. You're absolutely right. Sometimes it takes turmoil and things like that to really shake us up and get us sort of, rowing in the direction that, we need to go. However, I do feel like it's possible if you do feel stuck and feel like, hey, maybe I'm not, going in the direction that is serving me anymore. It is possible to make some shifts. Yes. And that's what I hope for people, that, yes, that they don't, get some dramatic news that shakes up their whole life and then they have to sort of pick up the pieces.
Yep. Can be harder to find the motivation to do it, but probably overall much easier to make that pivot without taking the tumble first.
Agreed.
So what kind of reactions do you see people have to the improv exercises that you do? Do you get a lot of resistance? Are people always raring to go? What do you see from the people you facilitate?
Yeah, most people are not. The majority of people are like, we are going to be doing what? And it's one of those things where, because I was at, in those same shoes, I can have empathy and I can reassure them as like, I hear you, I see you. I was in the same place you were. Because, prior to me taking that improv class, I've never done theater, it just wasn't, something I've done. However, I just had that, that little sort of nudge. And so, I like to use a lot of analogies and stuff like that just to help reassure people like, hey, look, this is what's going on. And I say, yes, you may be thinking that you're going to be put on the spot and forced to be quote unquote funny. Mm-hmm. However, that is not what these trainings are about. These trainings are the complete opposite. The whole point is to create a sense of psychological safety, in that you feel comfortable taking risks and it is working on an ensemble. Like I would never, so I love improv, and I tell people, I don't expect you to, after taking this class, like, oh, I'm gonna go and perform improv. No, we are leveraging the tools that they use to be able to think on their feet without a script and all those other things, so that you can perform at your highest ability, on the stage of life.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the things I love about improv is that because it is a team sport, I feel comfortable. Like I would hate to be a stand-up comedian
By
where you're
yourself.
you're by yourself on a stage. People have this expectation that you're supposed to be funny, and they're judging you already. Like that terrifies me.
Mm-hmm.
With improv, first and foremost, like performing improv, people come in and they're like, y'all are about to do what? You're going to make this whole thing up with, and so they are rooting for you. And then two, it's a team sport. We are all working together. And
Yep.
we have these sort of principles that help us be able to do that. And these are principles that really correlate to real life. And that is what I'm helping people understand when I do these workshops. And so after explaining that, people are still a little bit, like, all right, what are we about to do? Because again, we have a natural sort of ability to like sort of have a fear of the unknown. Totally get it.
Self-preservation.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're about to do. I want to stay safe. And so, I let them know, hey, look, I got you. And then just in my just experience over the last 12 years of doing this, I ease them in. If you think about playing a video game, whether it's on your phone or if you have like a game system like a PS5 or whatever, that first level is not like level 10. First level, they want you to win. So it's the easiest. And that's how it is when I have these when I have these sort of experiences, is like, all right, let's do something very simple. And I believe it or not, I treat them like how I treat my my 5-year-old, and I applaud and celebrate everything.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you stood up and you said something, whether it's right or wrong, you did a great job. And what I'm creating is what I call DOSE, DOSE, which is dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins.
Love
Those
it.
are the neurochemicals that help us be creative, help us feel like we belong and trust. And then as they do that, then we make it a little bit slightly more challenging. And they're like open to it.
I love that. I see a lot of parallels between that and when I try to encourage people to draw. And it's probably for a similar reason. Like I think about how easy it is for little kids to improvise, like when they're playing with little figurines or with playing make believe with each other. That's improv, right? They're making up a story as they go. We stop doing that at some point when we become self-aware and self-critical, much in the same way we stop drawing when we start comparing our drawings to the drawings of others, or to whatever we're trying to draw. It doesn't look realistic enough. Same kind of thing. So we stop when we're very young, both doing improv and drawing, and then that's where our skill level stays, is wherever we stopped. And so we judge ourselves so harshly when these skills are not where we think they should be or are difficult for us to tap into. So I do exactly the same thing. A lot of encouragement, a lot of building up the confidence and being like, it's okay. It doesn't need to be perfect. So that really resonated with me with what you just said. And as you get people out of their shell and learning it's okay to make mistakes and try different things, what kind of a shift do you see in the energy in the group?
This is where the magic happens. Once people, and so, we're sort of getting into the sort of play territory. In the beginning, when I was doing this, I thought like improv was the magic elixir. Like just take an improv class is going to open everything up. Don't get me wrong. Improv classes are amazing and it can transform so many things. When you get to like the root of what we're doing, we are playing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are playing, first you have to be invited to play. Like, yes, you can sort of be forced into it, but it's not going to have the same sort of effect. You have to be open and willing to play. And so once people like let go, take that step and they're in that space, then they start to trust each other. Then they are starting to take bigger risk. they're experiencing joy.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, you have the ability to do some very transformative things. Since we're talking about like sort of organizations and business and stuff like that, you can once people are starting to like get into the work, you can help them start to see the correlations between a small activity that they were doing and something that has nothing to do with it, but it's tangential. And then they can boom, see those, they can connect the dots because our brains are great at that, seeing patterns and seeing how that relates to other things. And then because they're in this open sort of space where they're open to seeing things from a different perspective, now they're open to shifting their perspective. Whereas, any other modality, they were like, what are you talking about? I'm defensive. Yeah. I'm not defensive. You're defensive.
I love that. I love that. There's a lot of stigma, I think, around play. It's often thought of as not being appropriate for a lot of situations, maybe certain levels within an organization, around certain topics or projects that you're working on that are serious. And one thing that I've kind of been picking up on lately in the current environment where we've been through a lot, just globally. The past couple of years, we've had pandemics, we've had, international conflicts, we've had a lot of political stuff that's been tough, and recession. So how do you feel, I guess, about being playful during hard times? Do you think it's appropriate? Do you think it's critical? How do you feel about it?
I think it's necessary. Mm-hmm. However, it's all about definition.
Yeah.
So if your definition of play is a frivolous activity that only kids do, that it's a waste of time, then if that is your worldview, then yes, anything that fits in that box is like not a good thing. However, if you really understand play and the essence of play and how it has the ability to, in my opinion, it's the elixir, it's the thing that's going to help us overcome these challenges, be able to see things differently, to be creative, to be innovative, to be resilient, then you realize like, yeah, we need this. And so it's all about being intentional. In the book Play by Dr. Stuart Brown, he talks about different play personalities. And the Joker play personality, maybe, in a situation like, oh, wow, there's some layoffs and stuff like that, maybe that's not the right play personality to be bringing in, because it's not the right place. I like to use the acronym MAP, M-A-P, as a way to like look at this. So M stands for method. What is your method of being playfulness? A is the audience and P is the purpose. So if your purpose is to help, let's take an example, like, there's, so restructuring, happening in the organization. And there's a lot of stress and uncertainty of like, oh, what's going on. And you're a manager and you want your employees, especially the ones like, say the restructuring is over and people are like, oh my gosh, is there going to be more? And at the end of the day, we need people to continue working because they need to be productive, or else we might have to do more. And so if your audience is, your team and the purpose is to get them to feel comfortable and realize that, hey, look, everything's okay in this moment, even though like we had this. So, what is the method that's going to do, is going to like meet those objectives. And maybe, it's getting them together and, doing something that is, more like, playing in a sense of like getting to know each other, or, taking some time to, maybe do something that is more physical, like, some stretching or yoga or walking. We don't have to like literally say, all right, you know what? We're going to spend the next 4 hours and we're just going to be playing basketball or something like that. Again, doesn't make sense. But if your intention, it's all about what your intention is. Play is the perfect thing, because if you think about playfulness is produced in an alert, non-stressed frame of mind, which is important. If you're stressed, you can't be creative. You can't be innovative. You're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. And you're essentially going to have blinders on. So you need play. Play is done, like I said, freely. No one's forcing you to do that, but it is enjoyable. And when you do all of those things, it does unlock the part of your brain that is associated with creativity, is associated with innovativeness. And so that is essential.
Yeah. Yes. Loved all of that. That's great. And I loved what you said about picking the right activity that makes sense. Whether you're using play to actually work towards solving a goal or a problem or coming up with a solution, or if you're just trying to reestablish some psychological safety within your team, right? Those activities may look entirely different, but still very important.
Yes.
And one thing that I've noticed, especially when I do Lego Serious Play, or even illustrative exercises with groups, I don't do a ton of improv, just occasional energizer type things. But the output that I get from those teams when they're using a creative method to kind of brainstorm or work through a solution, they're so much richer than what they would have just written on a sticky note. Yeah, really great ideas come forth, and people share personal details that then again build those interpersonal connections really well.
Agreed. Yeah. And so some of the things to piggyback on what you're talking about, and this is what when I do sort of lectures and stuff on play, before we get into the activities, I start saying some benefit. I'm like, how many of you would love to have some of these benefits either for yourself or for your teammates? And I talk about like increased flexibility, more creativity, how about create a bonding culture and stuff like that, resilience, and everyone's like, yeah. Well, guess what? These happen in a state of play.
Yeah.
So then they're like, that's like where the record scratch. You're like, you're like, tell me more. But you're absolutely right. Like when you're in that state, that's where we can access those things. If you're stressed, it is not possible, to do that. There's a researcher. His name is Charles Lamb. Yes. And I believe he's out of Berkeley, but he did a TED talk on our brains on improv, and he was actually studying jazz musician, and he found that when they were reading sheet music, so not improvising, just reading sheet music, it was activating the judgment center of the brain, because again, it's a very logical task. But when they were improvising, it was activating the creative centers of the brain. And so you're absolutely right. Like you will get more richer responses and more, sort of out of the box thinking when you first get people in this state of play.
That's great. You just wrote a book.
I did. Thank you.
It's called The Playful Rebellion.
Yes.
Would you like to give our listeners a little pitch, a little plug, why they should read it?
Yeah. So the first question I get is Playful Rebellion. So are you saying all of my employees are going to rebel and walk out? I'm like, no. The reason why it's called Rebellion, other than the fact that I love Star Wars, is that our brains are wired essentially for conformity. And if we really think about how work used to be, back when it was more the industrial age of work, where we were doing very tactical work, and how work is now, even though we need to do more creative work, is exactly the same. Everything's the same. Nothing's changed, but yet we have different outcomes that we need. And what they say about the was it insanity, definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And so we need to rebel against the status quo. And that's why it's called the Playful Rebellion. How can we rebel against our conditional thinking so that we can maximize our ability, at work and be more productive and things like that. So what the book is, it's, part sort of memoir, talking about some of my, sort of upbringing and my own experiences, coupled with, just some of my own experiences utilizing play, to get those things. And so, yeah, it's part guidebook, part sort of memoir, and it's all about play. And you, Sarah, you helped elevate the book with your amazing illustrations. I sing your praises all the time, in that I wanted a playful book, and then when I saw the first version, in its like sort of basic format, I was like, wow, this is very ironic. I talk about playfulness, and this book does not look playful at all.
Needs pictures.
Right? It needs pictures. And like you said, it needs illustrations.
Yeah.
There's something about like illustrations that, again, adds an element of playfulness. So between you and my interior designer, Bex, you two like elevated the book where it's like, yes, this is exactly what I envisioned.
What I love about it too is it has calls to action throughout, like almost like challenges for the reader to go off and try different things, which is hard to make a book interactive unless it's like a journal, but
Yes.
it is. It is.
Yeah, you bring up a
Yeah.
good point. Like that was the thing where I'm like, all right, how do we make it so that people can actually get the benefits? Because I know firsthand, I like reading books. I've read lots of books, and then I'm like, wow, this is great information. I learned a lot. And then you ask me like 3 or 4 months later, like, oh, so you read that book? How did it go? I'm like, oh, well, I haven't really done anything. So yeah, to be very intentional was like, all right, cool. Now pause,
Mm-hmm.
go do this.
Yes, that's great. Um, and and that leads me, I think, to my last question, which is, I plan to conclude every podcast with a challenge for our listeners. So if you could challenge everybody listening to this to go and do one thing to be more playful, what would it be?
Yes. What is something that you used to do when you were younger, preferably, before 13 and under, that brought you joy, that you probably don't do much of now? First, figure that out. And your challenge is, how can you incorporate it into your daily life now? And as easily as possible, because I know, it might be a little bit overwhelming, and it may require some creativity. You may not do it exactly how you did it when you were younger, but that is your challenge. Figure out what was something that brought you joy that you did when you were younger that you don't do now, and how can you incorporate it in, as little as 5 minutes, but as max as however you want. And that is your challenge. And then on top of that, monitor, like, how does it make you feel afterwards? Because we have this negativity bias where we have no problem remembering negative events. It's like Velcro for us, but the positive things are like Teflon. It just slides right off. So you have to be intentional after you're done to be like, oh yeah, how do you feel right now? And sort of be an archaeologist or observer, and monitor, like, oh, now that I'm going back to work, yeah, I'm more into it. So that's your challenge.
That's great. Soak in the goodness for a little bit before you let it slide off.
Exactly.
That's great. Well, thanks, Gary. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank
And
you, Sarah, for
yeah.
having me. And your first guest. I'm like honored. Yay.
And yeah, can't wait to see what you cook up next, because I know you're so creative, always working on things.
Yeah, my
And
pleasure. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too, whatever that is. Yeah. It's a
well,
surprise for both of us.
right now it's diapers and
Agreed. Yes.
getting kids to sleep, but
Yes.
someday. All right, until next time. Thanks for listening.